Good afternoon. My name is Meri McCoy-Thompson, and this is Dovetail Learning's webinar, We're Resilient, Bridging the Political Divide. I'm so happy you can join us this afternoon. At Dovetail Learning, our mission is to strengthen the resilience in adults and children, and our vision is to create a world of kind, connected human beings. All of our materials are open educational resources, which means you can download them and use them for free, adapt them for use in your community, as long as you give attribution, collaborate and share back any materials you use, and share alike with the same Creative Commons license that we use. A little bit about me. I am a nonprofit executive that has worked in health and education and nonprofits in general my whole career. My goal is to help others empower them to live their best life. And We Are Resilient is so good for doing that. I have 2 adult children, and we've lived all over the world. Here's a picture of us living in Beijing and a picture of us living in Delhi. I've also lived in Europe. I have a mother who has Alzheimer's, which you'll hear about probably more as I share stories. And I'm caring for my elderly cat. And I have a husband that we've shared these adventures together. So just to give you a little context, because I know when we do webinars, it's always nice to know who is actually sharing these stories with me. Before we get any further, I just want to thank you for being you, for handling all the challenges that come up in your life, and for taking care of the people around you, for caring. People don't come to listen about how to build bridges unless they really care. So I know you do, and thank you for doing that. Just a little on our agenda today. First, we need to spend a little bit of time recognizing why we feel so divided. We're going to look at our protective patterns and our cultural patterns that give us that perspective, as well as some of the things that are happening in the wider world. And then we're going to talk about how we can choose resilience skills to help us bridge that divide. We're going to focus particularly on the resilient skills of letting go and empathizing. A note about We Are Resilient. We have a whole approach that has a lot involved. Today is just a quick highlight, just a few of the top things that can help you in this Why We're So Divided approach. But the We Are Resilient approach can give you so much more. And there's a lot more on our website about how to use the We Are Resilient approach, both in written material and books and videos. We have a lot ready to offer you, and we'd love to do that. So after you listen to the webinar, please look at our website, dovetaillearning.org. So why do we feel so divided? It's really just part of the human condition. I want to say, we're going to talk about my imaginary cousin Rita first. Let's say we grew up together. We kind of knew we didn't agree on a lot of things, but we kept the conversation out of politics for most of our life. We probably all have someone like Cousin Rita in our lives. Now, everything she says is so offensive. It's gone from sort of blah, blah, blah to offensive statement. I can hardly hear it. I can hardly read it when she's posting it on social media. It really hurts. I want to just take a minute to acknowledge that, acknowledge those feelings. They are very important. And acknowledging that we have a lot of pain when people say offensive things is an important place to start. But I also want to take a big step back to see what is happening in the world to drive this, and what's happening in ourselves that can drive this sort of dynamic between me and Cousin Rita, you and your Cousin Rita. First, it's important to recognize there are forces in the world that benefit from this division, especially this political division that we're talking about right now. All the sense of fear that's coming, right? Because we have all these voices that are telling us these things to be afraid of. Climate change, multiculturalism, pollution, immigration, racism, discrimination, loss of traditional values, socialism, fascism, cuts to Social Security, unemployment, abortion ban, civil unrest, government interference. Everywhere we look, there's things that we can be afraid of, whether we're on the left or the right. So many voices are coming at us. It's important to recognize that the media benefits the more we're afraid. And so it's deliberate strategy to get us to be afraid. Whether it's social media or traditional media, we're going to watch, we're going to click the more we're afraid. Sometimes we just need to turn all that off so we don't get all stirred up and be afraid. And that is really an effective strategy. Turning off is a good strategy in terms of the media. The other thing to recognize about all of this is all of us contribute, right? It's not just something the media does. And how and why do we contribute? We're going to look at both our cultural patterns and our protective patterns to see how we contribute to this feeling of divisiveness. Our cultural patterns are how we view the world. We're going to be curious and use our curiosity mindset to look at this. What are cultural patterns? Well, they are messages about how to act or not to act. All these beliefs, attitudes, and behaviors that we receive, okay? They're passed down in our families, they're passed down in our communities, and they inform our identity. So they're a vision for how we see the world, and they're also part of our identity. It's kind of like water is to fish. We don't really see it, but it totally changes our whole world, okay? How we view the world. And they're made up of all sorts of things. These are just examples of things that make up our cultural patterns. Everything from political affiliation that we'll talk about more today, our ethnicity, construct of race, religious tradition, language, gender identity, socioeconomics, sexual orientation, family stories, and community norms. The list goes on and on. One thing to know about cultural patterns is they're unique to us and they're integral to our identity. They make up the worldview. All those puzzle pieces come together for our cultural patterns. Our cultural patterns can help us. They give us our core values. What's really important? What do we believe in? They give us shortcuts to understanding and navigating the world so we can make decisions quickly. They help us belong to a group of people with whom we feel safe. This cannot be underestimated because we as human beings need to belong to groups of people with whom we feel safe. They provide opportunities for celebration and strength. Our cultural patterns can give us great joy. The winter holidays that we just celebrated, a lot of us had our cultural patterns to say, are we going to celebrate Kwanzaa? Are we going to celebrate Christmas? Are we going to celebrate Hanukkah? What does all of that look like? Are we going to celebrate New Year's? What does it look like for us? And our cultural patterns help determine that for us. They also can harm us. They prevent us from seeing others' truth. Our judgments limit our ability to engage with others. They perpetuate racism, discrimination, and the lack of access to health and wealth. So all of those things can create things that create divide. You can kind of see where this political division can come from if we have these cultural patterns, right? I see the world one way and my cousin Rita sees it completely differently. They create the sense of othering, right? So people who don't belong to my cultural patterns, whether it's sexual orientation, language, religious tradition, they feel like they're the other. So right away, we can have this political divide that is difficult to bridge, right? Our cultural patterns from the Democrats, the Republicans, they overlap a little bit in the middle, but there's a lot of things that people talk about that are different. And the political parties benefit from that butting of heads. As we talked about before, the media benefits from the butting of heads. So ignoring the purple and going from the outsides, that's where a lot of people benefit. So part of understanding our cultural patterns is like, is there a purple version? Is there something that we can agree on? Cultural resilience involves us being curious to notice when our cultural patterns influence us. I think I'm afraid of this because my cultural pattern's telling me that. When influenced by cultural pattern, name our bias for others and whether it's helping or harming. This is very hard to do, but maybe if we're listening for others' potential cultural patterns, be compassionate. I see that this is really bothering you. Reflect back what you hear. When we really lean into understanding that it's a cultural pattern that's creating the reason that somebody is talking or afraid about something, just being compassionate about that and reflecting about that. We also have our protective patterns, which give us reactive resilience, but they really block authentic communication. It makes it difficult to have a conversation or be on social media with my cousin Rita. They emerge when we feel unsafe. It can be physically, emotionally, socially, mentally, economically, all sorts of ways. And it can be just how we perceive safety. It doesn't mean we're actually unsafe. So cousin Rita, when she's blabbing on about something that she doesn't like and she's so afraid of, it doesn't mean that that is actually going to hurt her. but she has a real fear of it, right? And so it means her protective patterns are going to emerge, and my protective patterns are going to emerge when I'm interacting with Cousin Rita. This is about losing our cool. So a stress event happens. Cousin Rita's at Thanksgiving and she's talking about this thing again. My protective pattern emerges. I have a peak, I have a reaction. It can take a long time to calm down. We feel really depleted. This is our stress reaction when any kind of stress event can happen. This is losing our cool. Now, what are these protective patterns that play here? These are the 6 ones that we have identified that we name: distrusting, hypervigilance, hyper caretaking, avoiding, defending, and attacking. I think as we describe these, think about which one of these might apply to you. A lot of people have all of these in different situations. Many people also have 1 or 2 that kind of predominate. Like, this is how I tend to interact most of the time. Distrusting is, do I doubt myself or others? Hypervigilant, am I on constant high alert? Am I afraid of something at all times? Am I worried about danger? Hyper caretaking, do I over prioritize others at my own expense? Maybe Cousin Rita is always cooking and not taking care of other people, and taking care of other people and not taking care of ourselves. Being curious, do I withdraw or retreat when I'm avoiding, right? That's avoiding, like, oh, I'm not going to pay attention. A lot of people have done this with their Cousin Rita. I'm going to cut off social media. I'm not going to attend Thanksgiving, right? Totally avoiding. Defending, do I act like others are constantly judging or criticizing me? There she goes again. I've got to respond. Attacking, I'm going to go and attack her before she has something to say about that issue, right? Am I quick to be on the offensive? It's important to recognize with our cultural patterns and our protective patterns combined, every human being has impeccable reasons for being exactly who they are. So my imaginary Cousin Rita, she has impeccable reasons for reacting the way she does and being afraid of what she's afraid of and having that worldview. Given all that, what can we do about it, right? First, it's important to be curious about our own stress reaction. When we have this protective pattern, for me, it's attacking. And if I start attacking someone, I have to think, what the heck happened? Why am I doing that? Right? Being curious about that. And then I can manage my stress curve. Oh, that was my attacking protective pattern. I have to wonder and assess, is that helping? Is that really helping my relationship with Cousin Rita right now? Maybe I'll choose a resilient skills. Maybe I'll choose letting go so that I'm not going to be bothered by Cousin Rita. I'm going to just have empathy for her and use the connecting skill of empathy to increase my connection with her. Our body's stress response is triggered more by perceived stress than the actual event. So it's not Cousin Rita that's driving us crazy. It's our response to Cousin Rita. It's a little bit hard to figure out that nuance, but it's really important. And if we're curious about like what's happening in our body, then we can make a choice for resilient skills. So we can start bridging the political divide. When we are more advanced in this, and practiced really is the best word, we can have anticipatory resilience. So we anticipate Cousin Rita is going to be at the next holiday. I am going to choose some resilient skills. So I have a set of resilient skills before I go in. So she has this conversation and I can have the courage to use them and we can maintain that relationship. We can bridge the political divide even though we have very different opinions on how the world should be. It's also important to think about this rider and elephant. So the rider and elephant was introduced by Jonathan Haidt. He creates the metaphor of this moral mind, one that makes judgments instantly based on our feelings and our body sensations. So that's the intuitive, our holistic body and our emotions that are making decisions. That's the elephant. The elephant really is in control, though it's steered by the rider, which is this rational mind. So we make up all sorts of reasons and ideas about what's happening, but it's our body that started getting in the way, which is why it's important to understand our protective and cultural patterns, because they're all locked up in this elephant. The writer also has the job of acting as press secretary, explaining the presidential verdicts of the elephant. So we have this rational thing going on, but it's our protective patterns and our cultural patterns that are really driving us. Reason is not the complete slave of emotion, but it's certainly secondary. It's difficult to change anyone's mind, including our own, unless we talk to the elephant. So we're never going to be able to bridge this political divide with Rita unless we are really in tune with what her cultural patterns, what her point of view is, and what her protective patterns. If we go just straight at like, this is reason, why don't you understand, we're going to make no difference in bridging that political divide. This is why we teach all the facets of We Are Resilient, because we know it's really important to attend to our intuitive self, our holistic body, and our emotions. So what resilient skills can help us bridge this divide? There are three groups of skills in the We Are Resilient approach. We have the centering skills, our connecting skills, and our collaborating skills. Today, I'm just going to give you one skill from centering and one skill from connecting. As I said, we have plenty of skills you can do more research on the We Are Resilient approach on the dovetaillearning.org website. So centering skills, they give us personal resilience, which most people think of when they think of resilience. And by using our centering skills, we're more able to create the world we want, which is that bridge with Cousin Rita. So when Cousin Rita is now talking, blah, 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 and she's saying all these offensive statements, we can choose a centering skill. So all the things that are happening, we can respond to without attacking, without defending, without avoiding, without hyper caretaking, all these other things. We can be centered in our response to her. The centering skills that we've identified, these are all research-based skills. There's evidence behind all of these books, and you can find that evidence in our books, which you can download for free, the PDFs on our website. So the centering skills that we've identified are noticing myself, paying attention to our feelings and emotions, breathing mindfully. When we really have mindful breaths, letting go, which is what we'll talk about in a minute, finding gratitude, positive reframing, and nurturing myself. All of these skills help us feel centered so that we can handle things like Cousin Rita and all the other stressors in our life. As I said, the spotlight on letting go. We need to have curiosity about what is happening with us when we use letting go. Choice, like I'm going to make a decision to do it, and the courage to do it. Those are our resilient mindsets. So letting go, setting free what burdens me. And my relationship with Cousin Rita, when it's going badly, it really does burden me. So that's what would be helpful to let go of in this instance. We have to be curious about what expectations. Do I have an expectation that Cousin Rita is going to change and see the light? Maybe that's my expectation. My attachment to the outcome. Unless she speaks reason to me, I'm not going to have a relationship with her. Or a judgment. Oh, that Cousin Rita, she is just an awful woman because she says all these awful things. What is not in my control? Pretty much everything about Cousin Rita. So I might need to let go of that. Was there a larger value or goal that will help me let go of this issue? Of course there is. The larger value here is, unless I start to learn to bridge the political divide with people like Rita, we're never going to be able to create the world we need. We can't just throw off the world, all the people we disagree with. We have to be able to create bridges to create the world that we need. So I'm going to have to let go of my expectations of the other person. I have to let go of this attachment to an outcome that we're going to have everything perfect and agree on everything. I'm going to have to let go of my judgment of Cousin Rita, which is really hard. But I have this larger goal, so I'm going to try to set free what burdens me. And how do I do that? There's a 4-part process that we've identified that can help us as we go through this process. First is just letting in. It's letting in awareness and perception. This is hard. What Cousin Rita is saying is offensive to me, and I don't like it. And what can I do about it? Just aware that that is happening. She's going to be doing that, right? And letting it be. I am not going to change Cousin Rita and her beliefs that I feel so offensive. I cannot change those. She is going to have those beliefs. That's where she's sitting right now. Life might change her. Other things might change her. It's not my responsibility to change her completely. I have to let go and forgive. Like Cousin Rita has all these cultural reasons for thinking the way she does and acting the way she does. I can release it. By accepting what it is and forgiving, I can release and say, okay, because by doing that, I can let come, making room for what is possible. Maybe Cousin Rita and I can agree on our grandchildren, or we can agree on what to cook, or other things in our life. We can agree on that we feel sad that her father is sick. There's a lot of things that we can make room for what is possible. And maybe in that, we can build a relationship that then we can start having an understanding of one another, right? And then we can start to see the possibilities, and that purple thing, that purple part of the Venn diagram that I showed you earlier, where maybe we actually see things similarly, right? We have to let in, let be, and let go of all of our frustrations, our attachment for outcomes, our judgment, so that we can let come and make room for what is possible. Another skill that we're going to talk about is the connecting skill. This creates the relational resilience. This creates the resilience so that we can have these conversations and overcome difficulties. That's what relational resilience is. Resilience in a relationship so it can continue to be strong even though there's problems. So there's 5 skills here: noticing others, heartfelt listening, empathizing, choosing kindness, and speaking authentically. And our spotlight today is going to be on heartfelt listening. Heartfelt listening is really, if you're feeling apart, listen with my heart. Am I listening with an open heart? Heartfelt listening, the deepest listening is present space, an open heart, and a deep receiving of someone. That means we're listening non-judgmentally. When Cousin Rita is talking, we're really just letting her talk about what's important to hear and really taking in what we hear, giving the other person space to share in a safe and open environment. How do we know we are listening with our heart? How do we know when we're not? When we're not listening with our heart and we're judgmental, we coming up with, well, she said this, I'm going to say that. When we are listening with our heart, we're opening it up, we can kind of feel a resonance. And when we're in that space with Cousin Rita, we might understand that some of these offensive positions that come out of fear, maybe we're both afraid of similar things, but we just express it differently. Or maybe there's a way to talk about our fears so that we can move beyond them. When we're listening with our heart, we find ways, we find pathways that we can't find with each other when we're not listening with our heart. It's a really important connecting skill. So bridging the political divide requires first that we recognize why we feel so divided, that we have this elephant that the media is stirring up. We've got a different perspective, a different cultural view than people on the other side of the political divide. And then we're all responding from fear from our protective patterns. So once we understand more of the context of that, then we're ready to choose resilient skills to help us bridge that political divide. Letting go and heartfelt listening are 2. There's many more research-based skills to help in the We Are Resilient approach. I invite you to look for them at dovetaillearning.org. Remember that We Are Resilient is a conceptual framework that involves our head, and we use it in our lived experience, in our heart, and we have concrete tips so that you can actually put it into place. So this is an example. This is the entire framework, the We Are Resilient approach. I talked about the We Are Resilient patterns, the cultural patterns about how we view the world, and the reactive resilience, the protective patterns about how we react to the world, our centering skills, our connecting skills, our collaborating skills. That's how we create the world. And then our mindsets, quick overview of those: curiosity, choice, and courage. They guide us in using the patterns and skills. I invite your questions and your comments. Please email me, call me, whatever you want to do. I'd love to talk to people about how this is working for them in their life. Remember, all of our work is an open educational resource. We have practical skills for resilience. We have lots of video learning, and you can do a digital download. Feel free to contact me at Meri@dovetaillearning.org and look on our website, dovetaillearning.org. Thank you and have a wonderful day.